Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where we talk about things that matter with people who matter. And today I am so excited I always say that I'm so excited. I guess I'm kind of an excited person normally. So I am really excited today because I have a guest, and my guest is Mandy Anderson, who I've known for a long time. Mandy
Mhm.
and I used to live in the same town. We used to live in Fargo, and then Mandy moved to Bismarck. And, I've been following you from a distance, Mandy, but it's been so fun to reconnect. So let me tell you just a little bit
Yes.
about Mandy. Mandy's a certified executive coach, a TEDx speaker, an award-winning author, and the co-founder of a life and leadership coaching company called RAYMA Team. And we're going to hear about all of those things in this conversation. And we connected first, Mandy, in Fargo. I don't even remember how. Do you?
I do remember how actually, and I was thinking about this morning. Jody, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm excited for the
My
conversation.
pleasure.
I think I first met you when I was working as the event specialist at the Ramada Plaza and Suites.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you came in and did a training with the sales team. And that was kind of the era of my life where I was first being introduced to any type of personal growth and development. And
Mhm.
I am certain that is the first time I met
Wow.
you, is you giving that training. I don't even remember what the training was about,
Yeah.
other than like really being open-minded to the whole personal growth journey. And I'm sure you said some sales stuff in there and all of that, but I think it was interesting because at that point in my life, I was kind of getting burnt out on the whole wedding planning event specialist position that I was in. And I was looking for something new that I could do. And I was terrified of public speaking back then.
Wow.
I grew up as a singer, always singing on stages. I did pageants, but I hated the public speaking part.
Mhm.
And I had to really get over that. But meeting you and other coaches after that really opened up my eyes to the whole coaching industry as a whole. And that kind of
Wow.
started my journey on, I think I might want to do that someday.
Oh, that's so cool to hear because, I'm sure you have the same experience. You speak a lot now too, and you do different things. And I remember a quote when I was younger, my mom was a teacher. And the quote I'm thinking of now is a teacher affects eternity because he
Mhm.
never knows where his influence stops. And sometimes we don't get to know the
Mhm.
drops we've put out there and how they've rippled out. So thank you for sharing that because it makes what I do when I just do what I do so
Mhm.
much more uh not meaningful, but I feel really good about what I'm called to do when I hear stories like that. So thank you for that.
Mhm. Yes.
So tell us about your journey and we're gonna go a couple different places here, but your journey that got you into this. So you were a wedding planner, you were working in
Mhm.
hotel industry. Then what? What happened?
Well, let's see. How can I give you like the Cliff's Note version, right? Or is it Cliff Note or
I think
Cliff's
I
Notes?
don't
I'm not
know.
sure.
Yeah.
So long story short, I took some time off to do some like graphic design
Mm.
work and ended up about a year later going back into the hotel industry as a PR director at an extended stay hotel. And during that time, I was going to a lot of personal growth conferences myself and a lot of leadership conferences. I think I spent an entire year where I would travel the country once a month going to a 3-day conference that
Wow.
really like it taught my husband and I how to get out of debt because we were in debt by quite a bit actually, like six figures of debt.
Wow.
It taught me how to just open up my mind to different personality types, how to communicate better with people, how to get clear on what it was that I wanted to do and how to get there. And within that time frame, um, I have a whole journey of I was born with cystic fibrosis. So
Mhm.
I went through a season that started during that time frame about 2010 where I threw away all my medication in hope of a miraculous cure for cystic fibrosis, which there is not a cure. It's I have to take medicine daily, but back then I was tired of always going to church and getting prayed for and nothing happened. So I thought I'm going to put my faith into action, and that was quite an interesting story. If you want to watch my TEDx talk, it kind of takes you through everything I learned through that.
Yeah, that's great.
But we also, during that time, ended up going through an apartment fire in Fargo.
I remember that now. Right.
Yes.
And your dog. Oh,
Yes, and we
okay. Yeah.
lost everything we owned. Our dog did survive. Her name was Ajabi, and she went on to live another 6.5 years. But all of that is really what got my husband and I to the point where we relocated to Bismarck, mostly because he got a job in the oil field with my best friend. Her ex-husband worked in the oil field at the time. And I told him I will not move anywhere beyond Bismarck for two reasons. Number one, there were no Starbucks past Bismarck at that point in time. And also because I didn't know anybody past that part of the state. And I thought, if you're going to be working with Rachel, my best friend's husband, then at least I know I will have a support system there.
Mm.
And Rachel was going to school at the time to be a biblical counselor. And we would write blogs. I started writing during all of that time. Um, Turns out when you pray for like opportunities to have stories and to write stories, you get a lot of opportunities to go through
Yes.
things where you get to tell the story later. And
Right.
that's kind of the whole thing. Like I started working on my health coaching certification at that point in time. And that was the first certification I got. Rachel and I decided back in 2014 that we should really actually go into business together. And we started out as life coaching for women, knowing that the big dream was to eventually be able to have our own curriculum where we could certify coaches and also to step into the leadership realm. So our first company was called Big Blue Couch Coaching, and we actually rebranded to RAYMA Team back in 2019, about 6 months before the pandemic.
Oh, goodness.
And
Yeah.
that we rebranded because we started asking questions like, if we want to get into the leadership world, what does Big Blue Couch coaching say to other people? Does that open the door for us? And it really didn't. It was a very counseling type, um, very female focused, but we often had men come to us like, hey, do you work with men too? Like, we want to do life coaching. We don't know who else to go to. And so we've worked with men and women for 10 years, but we decided let's actually create curriculum and rebrand so that we're a company for everybody, but we teach from a more feminine perspective.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the short version of what happened. I mean, there's a lot of trauma that happened
Mm.
within all of that too, that
Mhm.
really taught myself and my business partner about um, outside of just leadership skills, how does
Mm.
trauma affect how you lead and how you show up in the world? Because turns out it affects a lot.
Yeah.
So it's been quite the journey, but the coaching industry is the only industry I've been in the longest. I think I'm stubborn enough to make this work and to not give up. So I'm kind of surprised we're still here, but we are. So,
I know. I think about that too. I started my coaching business in 2005
okay.
and nobody knew what coaching was then.
Hmm.
I mean, it was,
Yeah.
and sometimes I think that too. I'm like, oh my gosh, next year's going to be 20 years doing
Yeah.
this.
Oh
And
gosh,
so
that is.
I know you're right. I hadn't really thought about that because it
Mhm.
is, to me, you mentioned Big Blue Couch being more like counseling or feeling
Yep.
like counseling. Have you found that people get coaching and counseling intertwined? And how would you describe the difference?
Yeah. We because Rachel has a counseling background, I think we have a better understanding of where the line is. And so we often tell people if they're coming to us because they have like anxiety or mental health issues and they haven't been able to find the right counselor, we'll let them know like, okay, here's the parameters around how we can work. Like we can help you with boundaries, we can help you with um communication skills, helping you figure out what it is you want in life. But when it comes to the therapy part, that is not what we do. And so we'll often work with people who are doing both. And I
Mhm.
think I think there's like everything, right? There's a healthy balance in the middle of that where sometimes you need both, sometimes you need one or the other, and giving people permission to figure out which form is helping them best is really what we want to make sure to do because I have a client that is from out of state, and she came to me this year to work on some communication skills within her family. And she's been going to counseling for quite a while. She's done marriage counseling, she's done individual counseling, and she's at the point now where she really wants somebody to help give her step-by-step guides and accountability to move forward with some things. And that's not what counseling is. I remember a
Yeah.
conversation we had recently where she's like, I'm just not sure if I should stay with my counselor. Like, I feel like I'm getting so much more from
Mm.
the curriculum and the coaching that I do with you. And I just don't know if that's like normal. Is that okay? And once I explained to her, like, a counselor isn't supposed to tell you what to do or help you even figure out the action steps. They're really there to help you process and, to provide the the therapy side of it or the psychology side of it that coaches can't. And there is such a blurred line sometimes because coaching started from like positive psychology.
Right.
So there is going to be that blurred line, but I think being able to know that, okay, your counselor's role is not to tell you, try this, this, and this, and then come back and let's reassess and see what we need to tweak. That's not a counselor's job. Their job is to listen and to give you questions that help you process things a little bit different, um, process a little better. Sometimes it's to help you figure out, do you need medication? Do you not? Like, are you safe if you are in abusive type situations? There's so much depth to it that really does go towards the trauma side, whereas coaching can help with all of that. You just need to have a clear understanding of what it is your goal is for
Yeah.
either one of them.
That's a really good distinction. Good way to explain the distinction because it is, you're right, it is blurry. And
Mm-hmm.
accountability, I guess I don't know therapy that well. So for me
Mm-hmm.
to be able to explain it the way you just did, I don't know that I could have done it that well. Um, so accountability is a big part of coaching, but not
Mm-hmm.
in my, at least in my view, not in a you have to, you should, if you don't
Right.
come back. Because that was
Yeah.
business coaching when I was in the real estate industry. It was
Mm-hmm.
do this, and if you don't do it, don't come back. You're paying me to hold you accountable to what you say you're gonna, and that just didn't feel right to me as
Yeah.
yeah.
That style coaching doesn't feel right to me either. It is a style. It's
Yes.
definitely out there. There
Yes.
are some coaches who do that. I have found that you can actually create some trauma from that type
Ah.
of coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so giving people the permission to grow in the way that they want, because that's ultimately
Mm-hmm.
the goal, right? You want to help
Right.
them get from A to B.
Right. Right.
And we might have, a lot of strategies that we can use to help you get there, but it's not a one size fits all.
Right. Right. It's coactive. The way I was trained, mine was coactive coaching, which is we co-design this. This is not me telling you what you should do. It
Hmm.
has nothing to do with me. It's all client driven. At least that's the way my coaching
Hmm.
is.
Yeah. And we've created a whole curriculum. So oftentimes when people are like, if somebody were to get an executive coaching package from me, they get the full leadership curriculum of courses and books so that they have stuff that they can do in between sessions, especially if we're only meeting once a month. And that way they're continuing their growth. And what they get from it is so different for everybody because they're all
Yeah.
starting at different places. They're all looking at it from different perspectives and they get the leadership principles, but they get to apply it the way that they see it in the world. It's
Right.
not like it has to be like this. So,
Sure. You mentioned books, so I'm just looking on my other screen here. You've written several books. Eight?
yes.
8 books, Mandy?
Is that where I have no
I
idea how
know. I
many?
know,
It's a
right? It says
lot.
8 titles, right? I'm looking at
Yeah.
Amazon right now. So, wow. When did you start? When did you write your first book? Do you remember? Like in
2011. It was
11.
actually right after I started blogging in 2009
Mhm.
and that was a whole experience because I had never really written anything before and certainly nothing that other people were reading and weighing in on the internet.
Mhm.
And so I think for me, I had to learn how to tell my story of what it was like growing up with cystic fibrosis and what I was learning to process through all of that because I never really took the time to consider how it really affected me and what was inside my thoughts. And
Mm,
so that whole thing, I really had to learn how do I tell my story in a way where I'm not making people around me who are part of it feel like they did something wrong. And that was a whole experience of telling my story of feeling like I have a victim mindset because I don't know how you grow up with a disease and not have a victim
Yeah.
mindset, even if
Yeah.
you're positive.
Yeah.
There's the things that happen inside your own mind that you don't always share with people,
Mhm.
that are just always like this monkey on your back, and you
Mhm.
can't get away from it. And me speaking up about it sometimes made some of my family members feel like I was blaming them, and I
Mhm.
wasn't, but I had to learn how to find my voice in that, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And how do I tell a story without um, hurting somebody,
Yeah.
because it's my story.
Right.
And so that whole thing was quite fascinating. I would say some of the stuff that's in my first book, I probably am kind of like, we don't need to read that anymore. That
Isn't
was
that
like
funny?
the
I
very
know.
first
And
one.
so that one's called In Sickness and in Health, right? Lessons
Yes.
learned on the
Yep.
journey from cystic fibrosis to total health. So don't go look at that one, everyone, because things have
Yeah, don't
changed.
do it.
No,
It's
it's such a true thing. When the
it
first
is.
book I wrote too, I'm like, well, although I gotta say, I looked at my first book not that long ago and went, there's still some good stuff in here. But
Yes.
mine was not an autobiography. Mine was just, the
Yep.
information. So from there, I don't have to go through all of them, but they're great. Unashamed, unrushed. She
Hmm.
cultivates resilience. Truth statement, prayer journal. Uh,
Yep.
Dear female leader, she who overcomes, dangerous hope. So they're all, I'm going to say inspirational. It sounds like
Yeah.
I
Yep.
haven't read them, Mandy, but it looks, they're beautifully designed covers I'm looking at. How did you get from blogging to a book?
Well, I think because we live in the age where self-publishing is so easy. All of these have been self-published. Now they're all published from our, like, we set up a media company within our coaching company. So
Mhm.
we publish our own books. The books that we have for our leadership curriculum are not available for purchase outside of the program.
Huh?
But I'm just that way. I like to put stuff together. Like, I've actually designed the covers of all of our books. I get into that, and not that I would want to be a graphic designer for everybody else. I just
Yeah.
am very particular about it in our own business. Like, I'm very particular about the branding, about how
Mhm.
things look, and so I really enjoy that. She Who Overcomes is really it's sort of like a Bible study. It's written
Okay.
from the book of Revelation, which is like, whoa, why would you ever write a book about Revelation? That's a
Mhm.
lot in there. But I took out the characteristics of people from like the seven letters to the churches. And like, how do you apply that in modern day? Not trying to figure out the symbolism of all the stuff, but what does it mean to have these character traits? And so I really tell the story of our apartment fire and the start of our coaching business in that book. And then in Dangerous Hope, I think that's probably the one I'm the most proud of. That's the one that is the award-winning book. It's my
Okay.
TEDx talk goes with it.
Mhm.
Dangerous Hope really tells the whole story of what I learned almost dying from cystic fibrosis because of my own choices. And I think I was really excited about the cover for that one because
Beautiful. Yeah.
the photographer, we just went over to the river here over in
Mm.
Bismarck, and I was like, I think I want to take a picture of me like pouring my medicine into the sand, because that's a big part of the story. And so we had a lot of fun with it, and she just captured the feeling of Dangerous Hope
Nice.
for me so well.
And you're drinking coffee, which is
I
very important to you.
Yes,
And it
yes,
must
it
have been
is.
Starbucks.
Yeah, yep, it is.
And by the water, because I know that's important to you too. Uh,
Yes, we live in a marina in Mandan.
okay.
So I love being in nature. I didn't know that about myself till we moved to Bismarck, but it's gorgeous here. I always wanted to move out of North Dakota, and
Mhm.
then I ended up moving back like further in when we left
Yeah.
Fargo.
Yeah.
But Bismarck is gorgeous. I think it's one of North Dakota's best kept secrets.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. And that kind of leads me to another rabbit trail we can take here. Living in the middle of a bright red state.
Mhm.
Because let's just go there. We can
Yeah.
talk about religion and politics because, like I said, we said offline. I mean, if we don't talk about things that are hard to talk about, we
Mhm.
don't ever learn how to talk. We don't learn
Yeah.
how to be critical thinkers. And so you reached out, and you want to tell that story a little bit?
Yeah. One of the things I've really I've really been growing through over the last decade is I grew up in evangelical culture, and I've had an interesting relationship with church over the last 10 years. My husband and I were really involved in church to the point where we were there to perform. We weren't really there to grow closer to God. We were heavily involved in like music ministry. My husband ran sound. And so back in 2009, when we started going to all of these conferences, we realized like we don't really have a close marriage because we're always so busy like doing stuff for everybody else.
Mm.
And so we decided to stop going to church for a season to work on our marriage and to really like we would stay home on Sundays. We would listen to podcast episodes that were sermons. We would like not clean the house on Sundays. We would really implement that idea of a rest day, which was really hard because we're not taught that just in our
Yeah.
society. So it was really hard to implement that. But there have been there's been so much growth in our relationship through the years when we live our lives like that. And we did, when we moved to Bismarck, we found a couple different churches that we were a part of over the course of probably 5 or 6 years. And just the last 4 or 5 years, we've just really taken a break where we might go with family for holidays. But I have learned that I really experience God in nature.
Mm.
That's where I became a runner when I moved here and when I got healthy again. And when I'm running, that's when I talk to God. That's when I'm really working through things. And I mean, I've read the Bible cover to cover a couple different times. We listen to the Bible on audio actually every night when we fall asleep. And we've been doing that for 15 years. And so I feel
Wow.
like the biblical teachings, especially the ones about character, have really been written on my heart over the last 15 years. And I think I have learned to really learn from other people's stories instead of just blindly following what one entity might be saying about people's lifestyle or people's points of view politically. And I reached out to you because I really appreciate how you welcome conversation.
Mm.
You know, I have never been one to love talking about politics, mostly because I feel like I don't know enough to
Mm.
have a debate about it. I
Mhm.
actually don't like debating on anything because it turns into such a like vicious thing where it's no longer learning, it's trying
Mm.
to prove who's right. And just in my work as a coach, anytime you're trying to prove you're right, you're not growing. Your ego is leading, your pride is leading. And so I am much more open to having conversations, learning about how people see certain things. Why is that? And I just reached out to you because I realized you do such a wonderful job about that. And my views have definitely changed. I wouldn't say I am loyal to any party, but I definitely want to stand up for people. I want to stand up for making sure that people are taken care of, people are helped, people are not feeling like they're forgotten.
Mm.
And it's been a wild ride over the
Yeah.
last week,
Yeah.
just looking at different things. And part of the story of our company is that my business partner and best friend actually is a domestic abuse survivor. And that entire situation opened my eyes immensely to um, what abuse survivors go through, what it's like when somebody is actively leaving an abusive situation. She lived with my husband and I the summer that she was getting divorced. Um, she would live with us while her husband was home with the kids on his days off from the oil field. And it was a, an amazing learning experience that was so eye-opening because even the way the church was treating her for leaving an abusive situation was not at all what I was expecting for how people would treat somebody going through that. And so all of that has changed my point of view on what it means to actually love people and to
Mm.
show up for them.
Well, and so I'll just say that we are recording this on November 12th, though, so exactly 1 week after the election of 2024. So when you say it's been a week, I think that's what you're referring to.
Yep.
Recognizing that topics and issues are only out there somewhere until they become real to us.
Hmm.
And you said abuse was one that you hadn't really experienced close up until
Hmm.
it happened in your space. And I think that's probably true for every issue out there, no matter what. Pick an
Yeah.
issue. It's just out there somewhere for someone else to figure out until it gets close to home.
Hmm.
And you mentioned that you're not a party, necessarily a party, but you're looking for, you didn't say it like this, but what I understood from what you said is the character piece. You were
Hmm.
talking about the Bible, and you were talking about recognizing character traits through
Hmm.
your work there too. And I think that's what we share in this time in history. You
Yeah.
know, it's about you're a leadership coach, I'm a leadership, coach. And if we can look at things from a leadership perspective, and you mentioned not debating, I always use the word
Yeah.
dialogue very specifically.
Hmm.
To me, the word dialogue is suspending previous assumptions in order to learn from each other.
Hmm.
And if we're
Yeah.
not doing that, either in live conversation like we're doing here, or you reached out because of a post, a social media
Hmm.
post that I did not intend to. I mean, in fact, it was just a picture. I posted two things, and one was just a picture, and the other
Yeah.
was something else, and I didn't intend it to open up all that it did.
Hmm.
Yet, that's what I'm here for.
Hmm.
Holding space is my
Yeah.
job.
And I've been watching conversations that are happening online between people. And I mentioned to you before we started recording that, there's a lot of people right now who voted for Kamala Harris that are feeling like they need to put down these hard boundaries against people who voted for President-elect Donald Trump. And they're feeling that way because they feel like these people in their life, a lot of them family members, directly voted against their rights. And I understand their need to do that. Like, I do not blame them for having to put down hard boundaries. I think the thing we need to understand when people are doing that is there is oftentimes a level of prolonged trauma that has been going on between those friendships or family members that they haven't been able to find healing from. And when trauma happens, you reach a point where you have to put down a strong boundary to preserve your own mental health and sometimes your own physical health.
Right.
And I don't blame any of them for that. I also don't believe that doing that long term to everybody is the solution to fix anything.
Yeah.
But I understand that some people have to put down these boundaries. And hopefully it won't be something that they have to do long term. Hopefully
Mhm.
they can eventually find a place where they can heal and have conversations that at least help them move forward in some way where there can be um, positive conversations about things. But
Mhm.
if not, I totally understand. And I'm just much more in the camp of if I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and give you grace, you have to be willing to do that to me too.
Mhm.
And I'm not the type of person to fight back with my words and make somebody hear me.
Yeah.
I'm definitely more of I'm just going to remove myself from the
Mhm.
situation
Mhm.
so that it doesn't get worse.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I'm not going to love you. It doesn't mean I'm going to never talk to you again. It just means I'm going to be probably a little selective of what I'm sharing
Right.
because I might not feel like it's a safe space right now.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
that's
with any topic. I mean,
right
really.
on. I think that that's the key to everything right now in my observation of things when I take myself out of my
Mhm.
own feelings about it. You mentioned safe. Psychological safety is huge, and it's something that unless it's kind of like we said earlier about abuse or any subject, unless it comes
Mhm.
close to you, it's just a thing
Yep.
out there. So
Mhm.
unless, at least for me, when I observe a situation that doesn't feel psychologically safe,
Mhm.
then it becomes a real thing. Then
Yes.
it's like, okay, now from my perspective, I want to share X or whatever it might
Mhm.
be. And in that space of sharing our own lived experience, there's really nothing to argue about. Because
Right.
if I'm sharing something with you, you've shared in your books about your journey, there's really no
Mhm.
argument to be had in that because you are sharing your lived experience.
Yep.
And I think what I observe happening is somebody will um, want to fix somebody's lived experience,
Mm-hmm.
or don't see it that way. Oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
dumb. Why do you feel like that? And questioning people's lived experience. And I just don't know what the point is in that. And the way that I've kind of been able to work that through is the
Mm-hmm.
book I've been talking about for the last, I don't know, couple of years, which I just love. It's the foundation for everything I'm doing right now, and it's called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And
Okay.
in that book, man, it's such an easy foundation. They
Mm-hmm.
just talk about above the line and below the line.
Yeah.
Do you know the book?
I have heard of it, but I have not read it
Oh.
yet.
So, just as a repeat for everybody who's listening, I apologize for saying it again. No, I don't. It's repetition is the mother of learning.
It
So I'm going to just do
is.
that. Above the line is conscious, below the line is
Mm-hmm.
unconscious, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there are two ways of looking at everything, from above the line or from below the line. And above the line is open, curious, and committed to learning.
Mm-hmm.
Below the line is closed, defensive, and committed to being right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
when you recognize those two, not even to take the topics out of the whole, at least learning of this process, the topic doesn't matter right now in this conversation because I can look at myself and go, how do I feel right now? Open, curious, committed
Mm-hmm.
to learning, closed, defensive, committed to being right. I feel it in my jaw,
Yep.
So that's the
Yeah.
first place I feel it. So I have to be, for me, I choose to be really aware where am I coming
Mm-hmm.
at this issue? And my goal for myself, for me, is to remain conscious as much as possible, knowing that I won't. I will fall
Mm-hmm.
unconscious. There are
Yeah.
topics that I go unconscious about. I
Mm-hmm.
want to be right.
Yep.
Politics, or not even politics, the character issue that we were
Mm-hmm.
talking about is a place where I tend to get my jaw set in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Character is very important to me. And that's not to say that I'm perfect, because I'm not. There are
Yeah.
times where I really have to look at, okay, um, am I being a hypocrite? And if so, is it because I'm being blinded by something,
Mm.
or has my viewpoint changed and I haven't updated
Ah,
the rest of my experience with that? Like I'm still talking as though my viewpoint was this, when really in like the depths of my heart, it's changed. And I think that one of the voices that I had listened to in the past and do from time to time now is Craig Greschel. He's a pastor in a church. I can't remember what it's called, but he speaks a lot at the Global Leadership Summit.
okay.
And he had this podcast episode where he said, you have to be willing to admit as a leader when you lied and you didn't mean to. And that really, the whole story behind it was like, if you've promised that you're always going to do something one way, but then months or years later, you now have more information around the context of that situation, and you realize that promise can't be followed through on because of what you know now, you have to be willing to admit that as a leader. Like, hey, I know I promised this, but I was unaware of some things, and I shouldn't have maybe promised it like that. Here's why we need to change.
So
And
good.
I think that's something that I'm just always looking for in my own life of where has my character gotten stronger, but maybe
Mm,
my habits and my words haven't caught up with it,
yeah,
right?
that's
Which
so good.
kind of seems like, did your character really get stronger if that's the case? But it's like, there's always a, okay, I'm evolving,
Yeah.
but have my action steps caught up to it?
Yeah.
Because our default is always going to come up, especially when we're stressed.
Mm,
And I think, one of the things that you learn in evangelical culture is that, you have to be willing to forgive other people. And I strongly believe that. I don't think we're often taught what forgiveness looks like and what acting it out and walking through it really means,
mhm,
because a lot of times it's taught from this angle of forgive and forget,
mm.
when really it's forgive and figure out some new boundaries or new habits that have to be in place so you don't keep hurting them or you don't keep hurting yourself.
Yourself. Yeah.
And I will say with politics, like I did not understand, like I feel like I have some karma happening right now because in 2016 I did vote for Trump, and I was excited about it because back then I thought people can change. Like, yes, he said some horrible things, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, maybe this will be good. And in 2020, I decided not to vote for him. I voted independent because I wasn't thrilled with either of the options at the time. And I can't say there was anything economically that I was concerned about. It really came down to starting to realize how a lack of character affects the whole nation
Mm,
and how you can, if you have somebody that is a bully and that some people think is needed to stand up against other nations, okay, what is the unintended consequence of that though? And a lot of it is the mindset of the people that are directly beneath that leadership, the American people. And when you look at the amount of bullying, the amount of disrespect, the lack of character, people constantly bickering and fighting, and we're wondering where that came from. It's modeled to us every day on social media, on the news. I don't even watch the news anymore, but I had to deactivate my Twitter account or my X account because
yeah.
I couldn't handle all of the doom stuff that was on there. And I want to be very intentional about what I'm consuming. And when I'm doom scrolling, that's
Hmm.
you're just zoning out. That's not intentional. And I think now I hope, I hope that it'll be okay and that
Hmm.
there will be some positive progress in the future. I hope that, all of the things that people are really concerned about won't happen. But I will say um, I'm concerned about the rape culture that might be um, just take off of people talking a certain way, women being abused, women being um, feeling like they're not safe in public because of the way that people who would do that now feel emboldened because
Yeah.
a symbol is really important.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about the symbol of what we've put in place. And I know for a lot of people in my family, in the state that we're in, they might not see it that way. And they might not understand why it's so important because they think that God's chosen one was put in place. And it's so complicated. And
Yeah.
I think name calling and calling people, well, you're not a real Christian if you voted this way, and it goes both sides. I mean,
Yep.
it's not just one side, that it can be both sided. I think we have to just really take a step back and realize, okay, maybe people aren't voting a certain way because they are bad people,
Mm,
and that's on either side.
mhm,
Maybe
mhm,
it's because there's something important to them that I don't see.
mm,
And I think that's something I want to remind myself of because I don't want to look at people who voted differently than me and think the worst of them. I want to understand where they're coming from and also understand I once was that person who thought I need to follow the masses because I hadn't gone through things where I started to understand a different perspective of what it felt like to watch somebody come out of that abusive relationship. It's
mm,
it's traumatic to help somebody out of that
mm.
because your whole paradigm gets
Yeah.
broken of
Right.
who you thought this other person was and who
Right.
you thought was safe and who isn't, and just realizing all of that. And yeah, it's been weighing heavy on my mind. I think it's the first time I've cried from an election.
Yeah. 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 I think you're representing a lot of people, a
Hmm.
lot of people. And this isn't a male female issue. This is a lot of people.
Yep.
You talked about a lot of things and I was taking notes and I think there are a lot of jumping off points we could take
Hmm.
a whole other route. We could do another podcast about this. You talked about grace,
Hmm.
um, offering grace and forgiveness. You talked about forgiveness. The way I've been looking at forgiveness is what I learned from Michael Beckwith back in the
Hmm.
day when I was working with Bob Proctor, and I met Michael Beckwith, and he said forgiveness is giving before,
Hmm.
giving before. And so
Hmm.
some of that doesn't mean I have to condone the behavior. I forgive something, someone to alleviate my own
Hmm.
angst about it. And in that space of forgiveness, I believe that they did the best they could with what they knew. And for me, what I'm continue to learn and observe is this is a sweeping generalization that I'm just going to say, even though it's probably not true in every case, but every problem in the world comes down to an interpersonal communication problem.
Hmm?
Just means
Yeah.
we know what we didn't know, we didn't understand what we didn't understand, we
Mm-hmm.
didn't communicate it. And maybe one of the, can I say benefits of the situation we find ourselves in right now in the United States is that some of this underground stuff is coming out.
Mm-hmm.
If you, I don't know if you saw this week, the Texas State University men who are holding up signs saying "Your body, my choice."
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Amazon, it has stickers that you can buy and
Mm-hmm.
bumper stickers. At least that's coming out. If
Mm-hmm.
it's coming out, we can shine light on it. We can ask
Mm-hmm.
questions about it. We can have dialogue about it. As soon as I say, that's wrong, you're bad, the only thing that
Mm-hmm.
can happen is defensiveness. And in
Mm-hmm.
that space of me believing I'm right and you're wrong, I have no option
Mm-hmm.
for a dialogue because it becomes a defensive and an offensive.
Right.
I really want to do everything I can in my power to stay above the line.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you kind of mentioned, we mentioned it earlier, the curiosity about things that don't affect us until they do.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, let me now, talk about this in a different way. I can change my mind about things. I love the way you said sometimes new information creates a new awareness for me, but people around me only know me as the old person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
mean old person, the old version
Right.
of myself, the previous
Yeah.
version of myself, right? And
Yep.
so part of the challenge we have when we start living into our leadership, the leadership that we're teaching or facilitating or coaching, is if I can't um keep my word, as you said, if I can't keep my word, here's the stake I put in the ground. I
Mm-hmm.
can't keep that word anymore because now new information has come. Then I need to honor my word and go back and say, here's what I knew then, here's what
Yes.
now.
Oh,
And
that is such a good explanation of what it means to honor your word. That is a great example.
and in that space, then I'm not telling you anything that you need to do
Mm-hmm.
different. All I'm doing is going first. You know,
Yep.
the only way I describe leadership right now is those who are willing to go first.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
if I'm willing to go first, I have to model the behavior I
Mm-hmm.
hope to inspire in others. And the way
Yeah.
I do that is to say I did the best I could with what I knew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And um, I think that is such a great way to look at it because I think we think that honoring your word means you follow through with what you said you're going to do. And we neglect to realize that that's true sometimes. Other times it really is figuring out where do I need to take responsibility for things I didn't know and promises I maybe made um, in a way that was maybe a little too hopeful that I'm always going to know exactly how things are going to go.
Right,
Right.
right, right,
Um, that whole thing though of, you know, the people, because it isn't just men, it's also women,
right.
who are saying your body, my choice. There are women who think that is totally fine and they're repeating it. That is terminology that perpetuates rape culture. And this is something that I'm just really starting to learn because I think a lot of women feel this, but we don't know what it is. We've never put a
Mhm,
name to it.
mhm,
We've
mhm.
never really dug deep into why it affects us the way it does. And that's why, because words like that become threats. They become, um, you hear somebody say it and some people might laugh about it
Mhm.
and then wonder, why is this bothering me?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
is not okay with what just happened?
yeah.
And I think anybody who's listening to this who has found themselves in that situation, not just with that example, but with anything where you're like, I'm laughing, but also something doesn't feel right.
Mhm,
I think I just want people to know that's the natural process of growth
mhm,
is realizing, hey, I used to find this funny and now I don't. Why is that?
mhm.
What is changing within me and what do I want to do with that moving forward?
Right.
Do I want to, you know, do I have to sit here and tell everybody how I've changed? Not always.
Mhm.
Probably rarely, honestly. You have to let yourself walk through it first before you know what should be said, what shouldn't be said. Or do I just need to really tap into what has changed in my thinking? What's making me feel uncomfortable? Like you said earlier, where am I feeling that? I remember in 2020 when um, Trump lost, I was kind of shocked because I didn't expect it, but my entire body felt lighter. Like I was able to breathe in a way I didn't realize I was holding my breath. And that
Mm-hmm.
surprised me. My first thought was, what's that about?
Mm-hmm.
Why do I have a big, like, like
Mm-hmm.
a weight off my shoulders? Because I can't say that I thought back then there were a lot of things wrong before COVID. Like COVID was an eye opener to me as somebody with cystic fibrosis. It's a lung disease. COVID was a very lonely time. It was
Yeah.
also a time where I felt like I know how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Social distancing has been part of my life whenever I'm sick. So I know how to do this, but it was an eye-opening experience to me to realize that my body was holding on to that weight in a way that I didn't even know was there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, we don't know till we see a different way sometimes. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's why if there's an opportunity to look at whatever situation we're looking at, talking about the election right now, look at that as some people are going to be happy, some people are going to be sad,
Mm-hmm.
some people are going to be jumping for joy, some people are going to be curled up in the fetal position. And to
Mm-hmm.
allow that to be what it is in
Mm-hmm.
an observational space, even if deep down I don't understand how somebody's crying about this. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Or how can you be joyful about this? This is just not,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean that my position is right all the time because
Mm-hmm.
I would be below the line trying to be right.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on what we really desire. Do we desire connection or do we desire authoritarianism? And
Right.
whatever we desire, you're going to find evidence to prove that that is
Mm-hmm.
what's happening in the world. And so,
Yeah.
what I'm working on is to see, as you said, the people. This is about the people. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when we're wired to be coaches and observers of life, I have one of my instructors in a course I took many years ago would called it being cool, KOO,
Uh-huh.
a keen observer of life. And if
Uh-huh.
we can just remain cool and
Mm-hmm.
our heads cool, instead
Yeah.
of getting involved in everything and like you said earlier, fine line between
Yeah.
allowing things to just happen and stepping in when you see something that you'd
Mm-hmm.
like to be part of adjusting.
I
So,
think, back in 2016, I did not understand how people could be so sad and so scared of an election. And I do get it now because I'm understanding things from a different perspective. I myself am very concerned about healthcare, health insurance for
uh,
people like me. I'm hoping it won't be so bad because the funny thing is I had that same concern when Obama won back in 2008. And back then I was just like, oh, this is not great, but I was basing it off of things I was told in the church.
mm,
And what happened with Obamacare, some things became more expensive for me, but overall, I mean, it ended up being a very good thing. I was close at that point in time, they still had lifetime maximums on your
mm,
health insurances. And I was like probably at 630,000 of $1 million life insurance plan.
wow,
And so that turned out really well.
yeah.
Now, the concern for me is if they make changes to it, if they bring that back at all, I have maybe 4 years if I'm lucky on an insurance plan because one of my medications is 300,000 a year.
Oh my goodness, Mandy. Wow.
And these are the things that, you know, I I've started talking about a little bit more in my circles of this is why I'm concerned about this, because I think sometimes that's a little bit easier for people in my family, people in my life that maybe don't understand issues of justice,
Mm,
issues of helping marginalized people, having, equal rights. They might not understand all of that at the same level as, listen, if they change this, I have 3.5 years probably, if I do the math,
yeah,
before I won't be able to have insurance anymore. And then I'm going to have to find a different option if
yeah.
they'll even let me like if they'll even take me on a different
Right.
option. And so
Right.
these are very real things, because the unfortunate part of my story is I now know what it's like to really suffer to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Before I lived those 2 years without taking medicine, I really had no clue how bad cystic fibrosis could get.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know, like, I probably have 2 years of not living on medicine before I start to literally lose my life. And because of the amount of scarring that's in my lungs now, it would probably be less time than that. So it's these type of things that once you go through something, or you know somebody who has been affected by these very serious things that the majority of people may not have gone through, it changes your point of view. It changes your perspective on why things are important beyond just what we think can happen within the economy.
So everybody listening, hear that in a way that allows you an above the line observation.
Mm-hmm.
You might not know absolutely everything that's going on in the world. And while we elect politicians, we make choices based on ourselves, there's undoubtedly another perspective to consider. And
Mm-hmm.
if we plan to live in this world with other humans, then there might be, I'm saying that facetiously, there is another way to look at everything that affects only
Mm-hmm.
you. And so I love that you brought that up, Mandy. And I know we could talk about a million other things here, but
Mm-hmm.
there, please, please, please hear what Mandy said about listening through a wider lens. And when you
Mm-hmm.
see somebody who's acting in a way that doesn't feel right to you, I'm saying this to us who did not vote for the current president-elect. When you see somebody acting in a way that doesn't align with your observation of things, just know
Mm-hmm.
there must be another story here. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm well aware of Mary Trump's research into her uncle and
Mm-hmm.
things that I allow me compassion,
Mm-hmm.
not in a space of um, condoning behaviors, but in
Mm-hmm.
a space of understanding trauma in a different way, understanding how people are, understanding, like you said earlier, people have not had someone speaking on their behalf. There are people who have felt that it's okay now to do things that used to be underground and they used to believe
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do, but it's not okay. Now it's okay, according to what we just kind of said. It's not okay. And the fact that we can now have a dialogue about some of these things where we can shed
Mm-hmm.
light on things without, fighting fire with fire. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there's got to be another way. And I love how
Mm-hmm.
you articulated that. I know you've got something coming up that I'd like you to talk about. You'll have about a couple weeks before your event. So to tell us about your event.
Yes. So we have a goal planning event that we do once a year, and we haven't actually done it for a couple years, so I'm excited to bring it back. It's called Unstoppable 25. It's a life and business plan virtual retreat, because I really do believe that each of us have an unlived life. And once we can tap into that and we can figure out what could be possible now because of how we've grown, maybe because of what's happening in our world, what's possible now, when you tap into that and you get that clarity, it does make you unstoppable. I think this is happening on Thursday, December 5th, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And it will be all over Zoom. We have an entire, like, we have a workbook that will be printed out. You have the opportunity to hear from other people. So it'll be a little bit of like, hey, we're going to do a 20-minute session on this topic. And then we're going to share with what kind of insight we learned. And the exciting thing about this is you start to hear from other people about, oh gosh, I never even thought of it that way. I've wanted to do this, but I don't know how. And as a coach, that gives myself and my business partner an opportunity to encourage them with what they want to do, and also give them some guidelines of like, have you thought about doing this? If you're stuck with how to accomplish that goal, here's a few steps to get you started. And everybody will have access to the recordings. So if you can't actually join us when it's happening, you'll have a members area on our website, or in our app. We have a RAYMA Team app
Nice.
that will be available with the recordings within about 24 hours. So that is registration for that is open now at raymateam.com. It's RAYMATEAM.com. And I will tell you right now, we have people registered that are on all sides of politics. So
Great.
I'm excited for that because I think there's going to be conversations around new dreams that are popping up. I
Mm,
think something for me that I'm realizing is I've never really been big into the whole advocacy world outside of how I've shown up for my friends that have needed an ally.
mm,
Um, and I'm excited to learn a little bit more of what does that look like because clearly that's an important thing to me to advocate for people who can't always advocate for themselves. And I'm realizing that I think I've been this way my whole entire life and just never realized it because I was
mm,
so focused on having to advocate for myself as a
right.
CF patient.
Sure.
And now, how do I advocate for my friends who are going through things that maybe not everybody understands? And it's it's giving me hope, after
Mhm,
after feeling a little bit hopeless for a few days.
mhm,
It's giving me hope about realizing what kind of a community do I want and need, and where can I find that? How can I give back to the community? And we don't just keep this fluffy of like, what are your goals? We definitely have you kind of do some introspection of what went well this year, what didn't, how did I grow, in my perspective? How do I want to grow in my perspective next year? And then, of course, we do have professional goals of that include like income goals. We have a whole bonus download that people will get access to do an entire year of a sales projection, not only by month, but by quarter, so that they have a really good idea of what it's going to take to get to those type of goals. So, yeah, we're really excited about Unstoppable 25. I think
nice.
as it gets closer, I get more and more excited about it.
Nice. And that is virtual. So you can do this
Mhm.
from anywhere in the world, everybody who's listening to this.
Yes.
And if you're listening to this after the event,
Hmm.
just know that reaching out to Mandy or Rachel, I mean, you
Yep.
both are doing the work you're doing. All these links will be in the show notes.
Hmm.
So reach out to Mandy if you've heard anything today that you feel called to follow up with. Is the
Hmm.
way your website, Mandy, or is there another way to get a hold of you?
It is. RAYMATeam.com is really the best place. Anything else that might be like MandyBAnderson.com is really just a page on RAYMA Team. So
Okay. Okay. So RAYMAteam.com. Mandy, thank you so much for being with me today. I know we could talk a lot more.
we
We could talk
could.
forever. And that's kind of one of the advantages of a podcast like this, where it is a longer format. And
Hmm.
we're not Joe Rogan or those people that are going 3 hours. It's not
Yeah,
that yet,
that is long.
but people are listening. So
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for you reaching out and for the work you're doing in the world and how we're bringing the world together, even in spite of the colors of our states.
Yes. Thank you so much. This is really the first recorded conversation I've had about politics or anything like this. So, not gonna lie, a little nervous. But
Yeah.
also, when
Well,
you really just make the focus of learning from other people
yeah,
and not trying to prove a point, because,
right.
like I said, I hope I'm wrong about the fears that I
Yeah,
have.
yeah,
I
yeah,
really do.
yeah,
But I also hope that we can grow collectively in our character and understanding of people who are different than us. And I
right.
think hopefully people can really hear my heart on that if we have differing opinions when it comes to politics, because I think the thing I'm really taking away from this entire experience this year is I don't want to villainize people who think differently than me. And that can be really hard to do because I think as human beings, that is our protective nature, is to try to make somebody wrong and yourself right. And I don't want to do that, especially on this topic, because I
Right.
think I want to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Hmm.
And yes, we do have permission, all of us, to find the people we need to vent with to get it
Hmm.
out so
Hmm.
that it doesn't just fester inside our
Right,
heart and we become bitter. Like I do
right,
believe in that.
right.
But overall, I want to make sure that when I show up in my life every day and when I'm working with coaching clients, when I'm at my networking meeting every week, I don't want to villainize the people in the room just because I know they may have voted differently than me.
Right,
I want to
right.
believe in the good in people.
Yeah. Well, you just declared it, so
Mhm.
so be it. And that's the beauty of having a space that feels safe to be able to articulate some of
Mhm.
these things that we can work through in public. And so
Mhm.
thank you for doing that. Thank you for being brave, going first and sharing your story.
Thank you, Jody, for giving me a place to do that.
Absolutely. And like always, everybody, find a way this week to go out and get real, radical, energized, authentic, and learning focused. And I'll put just one little note. My book is going to the printer tomorrow. So my next book, called a word that I don't normally say, but the book's called Just Give a Shit. It's so simple.
Mhm.
Care about something.
Mhm.
And so thank you for demonstrating that, Mandy. And I look forward to keeping in touch.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.